All right, we should be fine.
Excellent. Welcome to the Board of Ethics special meeting for July 23rd, Thursday at 7 p.m. We'll start with a roll call. We have Assistant Corporation Counsel Brian Candela. We have Tony Lopez. We have Nora, and I'm not going to mispronounce her last name. We have Cara Murphy. We have Cheryl, and we have Mickey. Is there anybody else I'm missing? Sounds good. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from May 28th? Oh, I'm not looking, or
So moved.
I can't make that motion because I was not there, so
you'll abstain. All right, Cara made a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Tony seconds. You don't have to come off, or if for Nora, you're the ones that are on video, you could just raise your hand. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, abstained, Mickey abstains. A motion carries. Is there any public participation?
No, I don't see any attendees from the public at this time.
Thank you, sir. So then we will get into, before we get into the old business, Brian, did you want to go over how the meeting went on Tuesday? I did watch the video.
Sure.
So I did see how it went. We can go over that section they referred to.
Yes.
Do we want to jump into that?
Sure. So basically, first of all, thank you to Tony. Tony was present at the meeting. So thank you for Tony for showing up and for being a representative for the Board of Ethics. It's always nice when we can have somebody there. It kind of continues to give us momentum to get these last two sections finalized. So right now we have 3212 was approved.
And hold on one, Brian, I'm going to just interject, make note that Geraldo has just joined us
Oh, great. Hey, Geraldo.
at 7:04.
So
Proceed.
after 3212 was approved by the Common Council, this is just backtracking a little bit. We forwarded 3212 to the code people to insert into the general code. So that should be hopefully up on the website, if not now, soon. And then 328 was under old business at the meeting on Tuesday night. 328 was prohibited gifts. There wasn't much that they, first of all, after some discussion and after some recommended changes, they've moved this to a public hearing at their next meeting, which is in August. So the fact that there was very little critique of this section would lead me to believe that odds are it's probably going to be moved to Common Council after the meeting in August, but we'll see if people change their mind. They did have this ordinance well in advance of the meeting, so I would have thought they would have had more comments if they had problems with it. What you see highlighted in yellow, so I sent you guys a black and white by email of the agenda because it's too large to email, but on the website, if you don't have it in front of you, you can always look at it later. We posted the color version of the agenda so that you could see specifically the sections that they had questions about or wanted to make changes to in 32.8. So specifically, we'll go over the easiest one first. So all of the comments were in 32.8 subsection C, which are the exceptions, which means basically that these are not prohibited gifts. And then they list out, I think we have 12 there and they want to get rid of one of them. So the easiest one to start with is subsection 8. It's simply a typo. Goods or services provide to the city. It should be provided to the city. So that's something that we're going to make that change. I'm going to make that change prior to the next meeting, but I wanted to let you know that that was something that they highlighted. The second change that they were discussing was 32.8 subsection C and then subsection 6 and 12. 6 and 12, again, if you can see the agenda from the website, they're both highlighted in yellow. They're very similar. They're talking about awards, gifts, certificates, plaques, ceremonial awards. 12 is more descriptive than 6 is. So 2 of the common council members who sit on ordinance committee wanted to transfer number 12 up to replace number 6 and then get rid of number 12. However, they wanted to add this language into it. Prior to employees, they wanted to put officer or employees so that all appointed, elected, and employed people of the city of Norwalk who work in City Hall would be covered by this particular exception.
Does anybody have issue or comments related to doing as Brian recommended?
I only have, Brian, I only have one question. I'm not looking at the one on the website. I'm looking at the agenda that you, the one you sent us by email. And looking at it now, I just have a question about section A, municipal employee and officer shall, subsection 7 and 8. Not by virtue of his or her office or position.
Hold on.
Are you in 32.8?
No, I'm sorry. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm on 32.4.
All right,
Okay.
we'll get back to that. Let's do
Okay.
2.8 right now.
Okay.
So related to essentially changing section 12, moving that up to 6 with the added language that makes it consistent with other parts of this. Do we have any comments? Okay.
So basically, just for the record, I'll read it. Certificates, plaques, let's see, certificates, plaques, or other ceremonial awards having a value of not more than $200, as well as any other things of value given to officers or employees as part of an official employee recognition / incentive program. So that was, they wanted to move subsection 12 up to 6 and remove 12 from it so that it would just be up where 6 is. That was the second comment that they had. And then there was a third comment, but if we're ready to move on to that.
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Just on 12, that employee recognition incentive program is capitalized, while in 6 it's not. So I'm not sure if we want capitals or not. That's all.
Right. So, and that's a good catch, Mickey. So I would say probably that employee, let's see, recognition incentive program, it's not a definitional term, so it probably should be lowercase. And I would say that employee, we're referring to the definitional term employee. So employee should probably remain capitalized, but recognition incentive program should probably not be capitalized. It's not a program that I'm aware of, and it's not a definition within the Code of Ethics. So good catch.
And have officer capitalized when we write
Yes.
this out.
Correct.
Perfect.
And then, so the other comment that they had was, you'll see in 32.8 subsection A, a couple of them noted that we increased the amount of a prohibited gift to a value exceeding $150. And they didn't seem to have any problem with the number. But then they noted that in 2 sections in subsection C, which is C2 and C7, we removed the numerical value. And so they just had a question as to why we removed the numerical value in subsection C2 and C7. I could not remember. I don't remember how long ago we made that change, that edit. I could not remember off the top of my head. So I told them, since it's going to public hearing anyway, and we can make changes both before and after that, I figured I'd come back here and inquire if anyone remembers why we did it. So please, if anyone knows.
I don't remember. I don't remember.
I'm just reading it over a few times.
My aging memory is shot on it too.
Would it have to do with 32.8A carrying the 150 carrying over and not needing to be redundant in 2 or 7?
See, now I thought that might be the answer, but instead of putting my foot in my mouth, I decided to come back to see if anyone actually knew the answer. But to me, that makes the most logical sense, that A is saying you can't have more than a $150 gift. And we're saying that in C, these don't, the subsection doesn't prohibit the following. And so my feeling would be that anything under $150, as long as there's no ill intent behind it, would not violate this particular section.
And that is what my recollection of the conversation is. This was over a year ago. But unless I'm open to, as we're reviewing this right now, if people have additional thoughts, if we should put it in or.
Well, my only question is, would that not have been in the minutes or not?
May or may not have been, but I have a vague recollection of an ordinance committee meeting where Doug Hempstead was worried about the dollar amount for meals and refreshments because the dollar amount was lower than the ticket price of almost every event that common council members get invited to, including the mayor's ball.
You're correct, Cara. Now that you mentioned that specifically, not only was he talking about, he specifically mentioned the mayor's ball, but then he was also concerned about how common council members are invited to other charitable events, and mostly because, you know, they want the common council members there to participate in these things. And the concern is that somebody turning around and saying to this common council member, well, that the value of that ticket was $200, and that exceeds the value. So I think that's why at least Mr. Hempstead and I believe also Mr. Corsello were both concerned about the numerical value.
Right. That's just a vague recollection. I
Yeah,
have.
no, I was at that meeting as well, and that is how that conversation went down. Because also we had value per year. So even if the one ticket was for the mayor's ball using the $100 we had, if they went to 2 different events, that would exceed the amount, and they didn't want to get tripped up on a technicality, essentially.
Right, because there are a lot of boards that common council members sit on.
Mhm.
As I recall, and they get invited to a lot of events, whether it's Lockwood Matthews, the Mayor's Ball, or some other charitable agencies.
I think also the X factor, and I'm reading 7 right now, is the second sentence, which it says, which are not designed to influence the proper judgment or action of the officer employee within his or her authority. So the key is, if they're attending the mayor's ball using Doug Hempstead as a capacity as Stu Leonard's, or Attorney Corsello as, you know, his own firm, and not, you know, being brought in to influence them, if you will, it doesn't, that's where the amount doesn't matter. If, you know, they're paying their way, or if in Doug Hempstead's case, if Stu Leonard's pays for a table and he sits there, that's okay, because it's not intended to influence him or their
And
judgment.
I also reminded the ordinance committee, because a lot of them are obviously, they're new. Only one of them now has been through this process before, Tom Livingston. And so I tried to remind the ordinance committee members that we've made a concerted effort to make sure that we don't place so much in here that it's information overload, and that the Board of Ethics needs to have the ability to interpret and to use their common sense and judgment and reasoning in order to determine whether somebody's doing something that's improper or not, i.e. we can't legislate every single scenario. So I did tell them that, but this was the one area where the numerical value was the one thing that they seemed to jump on.
Well, and I think as we chat more, and I welcome others' input if they recall similarly or differently, is that was the reasoning behind this adjustment, is by having a specific dollar amount in section 7, which is the one I'm looking at right now, it trips you up on a technicality and doesn't apply to all instances. Whereas by taking it out, it covers it and leaves to the judgment of the board that if somebody's doing it and being influenced, we have cause to action. But, you know, if they can't be called out because the mayor's ball went to $200 or, you know, some other charitable thing went to $300, if they're not being influenced, and shouldn't matter the amount, if you will. So it leaves the judgment to us. Go ahead.
So, and I apologize, I genuinely can't remember if we ever discussed this or not. But you know, there is language in other, certainly in New York and other places, about an exception for widely attended events. So, you know, so that you don't get into that question, right? It makes it clear that this is not intended to apply to an event where, you know, 300 people have been invited. So clearly there's an attempt to personally influence you by giving you a personal, you know, dinner.
Like a provision saying notwithstanding attendance of yada, 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 is what you're saying?
Well, so I think the phrasing was that,
Well, if you read section 2 for a second, does this apply? See 2, 32.8C2 at the bottom of page 4. And it says attendance at events of a charitable, public, governmental, informational, or business nature where refreshments may be served or small souvenirs of the event may be distributed or made available to all attendees, which are not designed to influence, etc. So that covers.
Thank you. This is, knew we had talked about this. So that covers Doug Hempstead's concern, right? Right? Didn't we decide that would cover things like the mayor's ball, and so it would be applicable? So the dollar value was not relevant there, right?
Especially where it says the last sentence, employee within the scope of his or her official responsibility or authority.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I think the issue for all of us is, at best, we talked about this a year ago, if not, it could be 2 years ago in some cases. So it's almost like looking at this again for the first time. Are we comfortable explaining it the way that it leaves the judgment to the board? It covers bigger events and rendering the dollar value not.
My only thing is, did we say we're going to condense 2 and 7 somehow?
No, not 2 and 7.
We're going to do,
No,
we were
it's-
condensing 12 and 6.
12
Well-
and 6, C2 and C7, Tony, were simply, they were pointed out because the numerical values were removed, and their question was why. So I kind of, in a roundabout way, answered their question saying that we can't remove judgment and reasoning and decision-making from the Board of Ethics. And that's why it takes a supermajority from the Common Council for somebody to serve on this, because you need the right people on this. But there has to be discretion within the Board of Ethics to read between the lines and make factual determinations when somebody lodges a complaint.
Well, let me use the difference between 2 and 7 to my recollection, and again, open to others' recollections. So 2, to Nora's point, covers events, all encompassing. 7 is if I go to lunch or dinner with a friend of mine who happens to be on Common Council and I pick up the tab. If we're just going as friends or in some social capacity, it's not about his or her responsibility or authority. It's more of a smaller event, if you will, a more social. So that's the distinguishment between 2 and 7 to my recollection. Now, if I take out Steve Kleppen or some, person in planning and zoning and then build a development because they signed off on it, that is where that wouldn't be appropriate, and us under our purview would be able to say, because the official responsibility and or authority. Do you see the difference there?
Yeah, or somebody, some kind of one of those landscaping, one of those companies that does a lot of snow removal or work on the roads, and all of a sudden they purchase a table, and all of a sudden all the people from DPW are sitting at the table, and then 2 months later they get a huge contract with the city again. That just doesn't look right. So yes, I think that's the situation in C2 where you kind of raise your eyebrow, as opposed to a Common Council member who might have served on, let's just use Lockwood Matthews Mansion as an example. And they served on Lockwood Matthews Mansion for a while, and they're having some kind of dinner, and they're identifying this common council member as somebody that they want to honor for their service to Lockwood Matthews, and they want them to speak at it because they have knowledge of Lockwood Matthews, and they're given some kind of small token for coming there and speaking or providing some kind of presentation, as opposed to everyone else who's just sitting there and having dinner and drinks. That's not something where you're gaining some kind of undue influence.
Right. I'm fairly certain, as I think about this, that this was an amendment at the request of the common council members at the time on the ordinance committee for all the reasons we've previously discussed.
Correct. Anything else before we move on?
No,
this
that was
point?
a good background information that I wasn't privileged to, so that was helpful.
Excellent. Do we need to make a motion on this section before we head to 32.4, Brian?
So ordinance committee made recommendations. I think it would be helpful for the next meeting that I can go back to them and say, we had our meeting 2 days later. We discussed the issues that were raised in 32.8. And this is where they agree with some of the changes that you recommended, such as, changing the misspelling of in 32C 8. They recommended moving 12 and replacing 6 with it and making the changes that Mickey recommended, if that's what you guys vote on. As it pertains to the questions in C2 and C7 within 32.8, here is the following response in response to your questions that you raised at your meeting. We discussed it, and this is the statement that the Board of Ethics wanted to make, the explanation as to why they did what they did, and then they can make that decision. But I think a vote indicating that you agree or disagree with whatever it is that they recommended that we just discussed would probably be helpful for the next meeting at the public hearing.
Excellent. We could also perhaps play this clip of the YouTube and let them see the live conversation and get the background just the way Tony just got it. So do I have a motion to, let's start with the 12 and 6 and the adjustments that Mickey made and Brian also recommended for 32.8?
So moved.
I move.
We have Carr moved. Mickey, you second?
I second it.
All in favor? If you're on mute, just raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Thank you all. Let's go to, is it 32.4 next, Brian?
Let's see. So in terms of, I don't think we have any kind of motion to approve or any vote on the explanation for 32.8 C2 and C7, but now I have an explanation for the public hearing, and along with any of the board members who are able to attend the next ordinance committee meeting. At least we've updated in our brains what it was, the reasoning behind the things that we did, and it was basically in response to some of the questions from the prior ordinance committee about concerns about ordinance committee members or common council members attending events, charitable events that they're invited to because people want them there because they need to see what's going on in the community so they can make the best decisions for the community. So I think that explanation will be helpful for them as it pertains to C2 and C7. Those are the only issues they raised about 32.8, which is the one that's coming up for public hearing in August. I will inquire from the ordinance committee chair as to whether she'd like to place 32.4 on as old business at the August meeting, so that even if we don't discuss it in detail, at least the ordinance committee members will have a chance to digest it prior to the September meeting. So I can certainly ask about that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just scrolling up to the agenda.
Hey, Tony, if you would like, I can send you about 400 pages of our made over the last 2 years.
Tony, don't take him up on it.
I won't.
Mickey
I was,
took
I,
great
I was hoping
notes.
for the cliff notes.
Those are the cliff notes. That's the scary part.
Oh, wow.
The, and just so everyone's aware, as it pertains to the Citizens Guide, 32.8 and 32.4, which are the last two that we have here that are kind of in the, hopefully at the tail end of being approved and changed. If the Common Council, if the Ordinance Committee approves and sends it to Common Council after the next meeting, hopefully the Common Council would make the approved changes. With those approved changes, we could then go back at our next meeting, whether it be in August or September, and then make the changes based on the final version of 32.8 to the Citizens Guide. And that would just leave us the 32.4 conflicts of interest. And then theoretically, the Citizens Guide would probably be close to being done, and then could be updated formally.
Does somebody have a different recollection than me in that 32.4 is pretty much ready to submit? We just held it back to feed them one section at a time to not overwhelm them, and that we can submit this, and then if they have questions, we can engage with them at that time and, you know, make adjustments or amendments if we're on the same page? Or is there a recollection that we need to go through it and parse through before submitting it?
I just had a question on it earlier.
Yeah, go ahead.
On that 32.4. Maybe somebody can provide some enlightenment on 7 and 8.
Is that under subsection A, Tony?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yep.
Am I able to? Well, so I was going to ask if I can share so I can show it, but I'm sure you're looking at the same thing. It almost, I know there's some verbiage that distinguishes one from the other, but it also, I just wonder if can it be combined?
Can you see on my, I don't know, I just shared my screen. I don't know if it,
Let me
Yep,
see.
so it's 32.4, section 7 and 8, these two.
Right.
Similar.
Well, and I know I see the grant any special consideration or receive any special consideration, and that's where I'm wondering, can that be, combined there? Grant any special, receive or grant any, and thereby combining it? I don't know.
I'm just reading it over
Sorry.
several times.
It's another case of, I'm not sure why we left it in. I know we discussed it, and there was probably a reason why we said, let's leave them separate, to show one had to do with receiving and the other one had to do with granting. But I don't remember exactly.
And that's the only distinguishing factor right there. And I'm just wondering if it can be just said both ways and just eliminate what otherwise could be like, you have to look at it twice as I did and say, well, what's the difference there? And it's just that, grant versus receive. And can't we just say that?
Is there a difference in definition between grant and receive, as we
No,
understand?
but I think it's understood. I'm not suggesting we eliminate any of those two words. I'm merely just saying use them both, but consolidate
Okay.
both lines. That's all.
If you were gonna change them, I would take out.
Well, hold on. So
Well,
real, go ahead. Carl.
Okay.
Just real quick, is 7, if you read the second sentence, one's talking about person, and then the second sentence, one's talking about business. So it's possible, and this is trying to re-jog my memory. It's possible one had to do with an individual and one had to do with, a person's business, if you will. And not saying that's it, just seeing a difference in the two. Go ahead, Carl.
Well, I'm just saying it could be just the same advantage to any person, activity or business transaction. I'm just saying, I don't know. I understand what, you'd want to distinguish the business from a person. It's just that it's awfully close, except for that, for, an individual versus an entity.
No, valid point. Go ahead, Carr.
Person is a defined term, and I was just gonna bring up the code, so just give me a minute.
Yep.
So I can look at the definition.
And that could be a good reason if it's, defined that way.
Well, person includes both individuals and associations, firms, partnerships, and bodies politic and corporate. So it's both
What are you
persons.
looking at? I'm just curious.
I've had to pull up the code for the city of Norwalk on my
Right.
other computer screen. I'm running off 2 computer screens right now.
I'm just going up and reading through all of 32.4 because sometimes when you take something out of context, you forget why it's the way it is. So I just want to read through sequentially, and feel free to join me and just see if there's something that jogs, because it looks like there's a reason that we kept them separate even in 1 through 4 here, to be specific with nuance, if you will.
Right. It's also my vague recollection from a long time ago at an ordinance committee meeting that this is going to be a section the ordinance committee is going to want to work on. Don't ask me
So,
why. I don't really.
yeah, so the thing that jumped out to me was, number one, this was, of all the sections that we had, this might be the most problematic one that the ordinance committee raised the most issues with. The prior iteration of the ordinance committee, this
Yeah.
one has not seen this one before. When I'm looking at 7 and 8, and I had to read it a couple times, and I understand Tony's concern about, multiple, 1 through 7, 1 through 8. I mean, it just sometimes the amount of exceptions or the numbers kind of overwhelm people. In this particular situation, though, I think that it would be very difficult to combine the two, for the fact that the first one's talking about how you're a person that's working for the city. You have this office or this position, either appointed or you're an employee of the city or elected, and you're granting some kind of special consideration based on your power to some person, whether it be an individual or some kind of business or company beyond generally available to the public, as opposed to you are in the same position, but you're receiving some kind of benefit, almost like an insider trading kind of thing, where you have
That's
some
the
kind of knowledge
difference.
or connection. That's the difference, I think.
Good job.
Yeah.
So, Tony, an example that might not actually be a good one, but popped in my head, is if you're the head of the fields for baseball and you grant permission for your daughter to get married on a baseball field, because you can, and that's one aspect. And then although to Tony's point, he wanted to just consolidate. He didn't say take grant or receive out. He was
That's
just
what I was
saying,
saying, yeah.
put it in one.
And it might
Correct,
be too
yeah.
wordy too. I mean, I'll admit, I don't know how wordy it could get, but I'm not eliminating the words. I'm not saying get rid of grant any special, and I'm not saying get rid of receive any special consideration. I'm merely saying take the two, keep all the relevant parts that are important there. Keep them. Just can we consolidate?
Like, one thing that I noticed is on 7, the statement finishes with public, right? It says
Mhm.
that which is generally available to the public. Yet on 8, it went on to include, said
Right.
generally available to the public or officers and employees of the city, which
That's a good catch-all, though. Why is one limited to the public and the other one
Yeah.
expanded?
it's almost like, yeah.
Yep.
It's basically
it-
saying there's certain,
Just to be clear, I see the value of both. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to diminish the value whatsoever.
And Tony, I think that it's basically your point is well taken, and it's just a matter of, quite honestly, I think it's going to come down to how does the ordinance committee feel about having, having a period after public in 7, unless we change the language, and just putting 8 right after it, or keeping them separate. I think it's an excellent point about whether you can separate them or keep them together. It's just a question, I think, of whether how the ordinance committee feels about having 7.
So here's an example of what I'm suggesting. This is just an example, and I'm not saying this is what it should be. So what I'm about to suggest, I'm not saying this is what it should be. It's just a hypothetical. So let's say we start with 7. Not by virtue of his or her office or position of employment, it's identical to 8 with the city. Yes? Everybody with me there?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so now the next sentence, grant any special consideration or receive any special consideration, treatment, or advantage. You see, and there, that's what I'm just saying. Is there a way that we could do that without taking anything out? Or does it blur it? I mean, I'm open to the fact that it could blur it, but I'm just trying to figure out.
Well,
Really
and
look-
Tony, just
But-
to add to your point, and you can correct me if I'm misinterpreting, but if take that further to where we get to Geraldo, it says, or advantage to any person in any activity or business transaction beyond that which is generally available to the public or officers and employees of the city, and that combines 7 and 8.
Yeah, because it says employees. That's right. I didn't see that.
The only thing that occurs to me that there might be, the reason there might be a distinction with having public and receive, or public or officers employees, because you would not want someone to grant a special consideration that was available to officers and employees of the city to someone who is not an officer of the employee of the city.
That is also good.
So I think that might be why there's a distinction between the two of them, because it's okay to receive something that's only available to officers or employees of the city, but it's not okay to grant something that's only available to those people.
That actually,
That is correct. I agree.
good job, Nora.
So if we can use an example, it might solidify. I mean, so that I could, see that.
So an example would be, say the mayor is granted a special consideration of having a parking space at, a school or a beach, his own personal parking space. It's okay for the mayor to be granted such consideration, or reserve seating at a school concert because he's the mayor. That's okay for him to be granted that, but it's not okay for the public to be granted a reserved parking space at, the beach or city hall. That might not be a great example, but that's one that popped in my head.
No, that's a good example, but it's granted by the mayor. It's okay for the mayor to receive something, but for him to grant his buddy a parking space at the beach, that's
Right. That might be better.
Does that help, Tony? Does that?
A little, yeah. It's kind of like splitting hair, but it could work.
Oh, believe me, read through the code. It's a lot of splitting hairs.
Right.
And actually, you know what, Mickey, feel free to send Tony your 400 pages of notes, and he'll get a feel for the couple of years and the splitting of hairs that went into this.
Yeah, I have twice as much hair as I had 2 years ago because
Mike,
right, so-
I think if we want to,
Go ahead, Geraldo.
sorry, I was just going to say, I think Corsello had brought this up in the public discussion. I think that this was one of the issues. If we go back and look at the notes, I think we would see it, because I can recall he had an issue, and it's really around similar to what Nora was speaking about ending up granting, some privilege or what could be perceived as privilege to someone that's not an officer.
Oh, so
I-
you do
yeah, I-
recollect that there was
I would
discussion on it.
support. Yeah, and I would support keeping them as two separate.
So,
Initiative
Geraldo,
with
you
7
are
and 8.
correct. You are correct. The last time we put this on, ordinance committee had some questions, and what I distinctly remember was, after that, I remember coming back to ethics, Board of Ethics, and I believe over a period of 2 to 3 meetings, significant changes were made to 32.8, which is why I think it went so smoothly this time. And significant changes were made to 32.4. We haven't tested those changes in front of ordinance committee yet, but I believe that changes were made in response to the concerns that they had, or if they weren't made, we at least discussed them.
I agree with that, Brian, and I suspect the ordinance committee is going to slice and dice this. Because I remember so much discussion before on it.
This was probably the most controversial of the sections that we had, that had the most, it had the most amount of ordinance committee members speaking up. We had at least 3 or 4 of them. And compared to the other sections for ethics, most of them was only like one person asking questions about it. This one had 3 or 4, and specifically, I remember Doug Hempstead, Mike Corsello, and Tom Livingston all had fairly strong opinions about this, which is why we went back to the drawing board. We went back and discussed it to try and address some of those issues, or to come up with an explanation the next time we went back.
So I think I don't think we need to make it a vote because it is. Are we comfortable leaving 7 and 8 separate at this time? Are you okay with that, Tony?
No, I am. I'm fine. I'm fine in lieu of the fact that, yes, that was explained. That's fine.
Perfect. And thank you for that discussion, Tony. It helps us jog our memories of how we arrived to where we did. So thank you.
Sure.
I would, are there other things that somebody would like to go over in 32.4, or shall we send this off for the ordinance committee's review and then engage with them, knowing that they'll probably have questions and be ready to discuss, and if we have to bring back to our board, bring back at that time for discussion?
I haven't that I can think of.
And feel free to take your time reviewing. I know it's awkward on Zoom, but take a minute or two to just refresh. Give it one more minute.
I can't see anything that sticks out on my end.
Geraldo, Nora, or Cara, do you want to,
I'm all set,
Yep.
thank you.
Fine.
I have a question. Is this consistent that it's presented as singular in all other areas where it says municipal employee or officer instead of having the plural? I'm just trying to read.
can you point to,
Just in the beginning of 32.4, it says a municipal employee or officer shall, which gives the impression you're talking about in a singular form of one person, as opposed to the plural of that this is something applied to all municipal employees and officers.
well, when you're reading it, it's for all, but it's as an individual reading it.
Yeah, that's what, is this consistent with it that way?
Geraldo, which section are we in again?
32.4 A, he's just saying the first sentence is a municipal employee or officer shall. He's just asking, is it consistent that way through the rest of the board or through the rest of the ethics, the code? And based on 32.8, I'll go with yes. 32.12.
Yes, that is consistent.
Yes, it is consistent.
Okay. And I didn't go back to, don't have the rest in front of me, but that kind of stuck out to me as I'm looking at this. It sounds
Oh, fair enough.
different.
And again, we will get a chance to review this in depth with the ordinance committee, and when they engage us with it. Is there anything else, Geraldo, you'd like to point out at this time?
No, just going to say maybe just ask that Brian review this, since it's kind of awkward. We'll have the time to go back on all, but if he can check that before the meeting and see also that this is consistent. That's not something just standing out in a different way.
Geraldo, can you see my screen still?
Yeah,
So if you look here at 32.8, it says an officer or employee in the singular, no officer or employee. And then in 32.12, see if there's a place where it comes up.
It comes up in a couple of places, but it's always singular.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's his question. That's
all right. If we're consistent.
Yep. No, it's a good, here we go. All right, yeah, no, so that's, it is consistent.
The only time it comes up with plural is if it needs to be plural. And I saw one spot that it did come up plural, but it had to be plural in that location.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I see this part here where you have it on. Yeah, so I'm good.
All right, well, prior to asking if there's anything else, I want to thank you all for coming to this special session and spending a Thursday evening in July with us. We greatly appreciate and value all your time. Is there anything else anybody would like to go over prior to us adjourning this evening? Excellent. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
A motion.
Tony motions. Do we have a second?
I'll
Cara?
second.
Say again.
No,
Is that Nora or
No,
Cara?
it didn't.
It was both of us at the same time.
All right, well, we'll give this one to Nora for a change.
Variation in the
Yeah.
minute.
Nora seconds the motion to adjournment. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Please, nobody oppose. Anybody oppose? Abstain. Excellent. Motion carries. Again, thank you all. Stay cool out there. Stay healthy, and look forward to crossing paths soon.
Have a good
Thank
weekend,
you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hopefully see you all soon. Please stay safe.
Yep.
Okay, bye.
Bye.